Welcome to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. On this beautiful, warm March day in California, it must be 78 where I'm sitting right now. I mean, it's absolutely perfect. It is ideal. So I'm talking to one of our Patreons. This person is incredibly intriguing to me because she said to me something that I think that few people, and I mean few people, notice. And we're talking 1% of 1% of 1%. It was astonishing to read her words because I just don't hear anyone at this level of consciousness. It's something that I've mentioned in the past, in a couple passings, and I was struggling to figure out how to articulate what the deal was. It has to do with reality. It has to do with maybe in some cases a Mandela effect. But I'm not sure that what's going on is what we think is going on anymore. But it's much more interesting than just a matrix or something like that. It's much more interesting, in my opinion. It feels to me as if perhaps this reality is nothing more than a dream. I know that's a trivial thing to say in some camps, but bear with me here. This particular dream has quite a few senses. And so when we go to bed in this reality and we have a dream within this reality, it is one of a subset. It just reminds me of the old George Carlin routine where he said, when you go on vacation, you have to grab some of your stuff from where you live and take it to where you're going. And then if you happen to venture away from the hotel to stay a day in some other location, you have to take another smaller piece of your stuff. So it's like the Russian doll routine. And so to me, this reality, although very vivid and has physical pain and what have you, when you go into the subset of the set, you get a lighter version of it with less senses. But that's not even the purpose of this episode. The purpose of this episode is that as I become more aware, I don't know if it's as a result of doing this show, I can't really say that I have any deep conversations in person. Like I'm having a deeper conversation on a Patreon chat than I am right now anywhere else. And I'm having some great conversations. But here's the thing, and I'm going to try to say this in a way that makes instant sense. I remember multiple instances of my past. We're not talking about previous lives. We're talking about this one. I have memories of the world being very, very, very different. And when I say very different, the architecture, like everywhere I went, was different. We were different as people. And not just the whole thing that we all know that in the 70s we were goofy and danced disco, and in the 50s there was something else. And this is as if the very artistic method by which we built society and built reality was different. And it is, so Mandela effects are little tiny changes where Eli Whitney is now a white guy from Yale who never picked cotton in his life versus the black Southerner that most of us remember who picked cotton, and through doing so and looking at other machinery around him, figured out how to make wires bang into cotton blooms and tangle them up into a machine that then could scrape them off, and you could harvest cotton out of these trees. One doesn't make any sense. One makes sense. But if you were raised with the white Yale guy, you think we're nuts for remembering the black guy, and vice versa. I think that there are most certainly echoes of these worlds that I can remember. These, it's almost like a paint job and a theme that was completely different. And I'll give you an example. I'm going to give you some specific examples. There's one that I saw the other day, and this is where it gets almost like an Easter egg hunt. It's really, really weird, but it's kind of exciting at the same time. Now, what I have said in the past is that I will be driving either down the highway or driving in Los Angeles, and I will turn a corner, and whatever's happening, there's an echo of my previous reality. And again, I don't know if it's previous life. I think we have one soul life and many vessel lives. But I will be driving down the street, and especially the highways here and there, and if foliage is in a particular configuration and the cement overpass is very nice and optimized, not a kind of a rundown, graffitied one, the whole world feels different for 3 to 5 seconds. And it's like I'm going back and living in that other reality. And here's the interesting thing. This one sucks, and the other ones are amazing. This one sucks because people are greedy and evil from time to time, right? And in the other world, we've all balanced out. It's almost as if we're traveling, like I'm traveling like, hell, I don't know, 2, 3, 4,000 years in the future. For whatever reason, we still have cars. And we just kind of figured it out genetically. That's the only reason why I'm advancing time, is that it feels like we figured it out. Now, I'm going to give you some examples. This is where hopefully some of you get triggered into your memories as well. And I'm not trying to brainwash anyone into this belief system. But she said that she had this. I don't even know if what I'm describing is exactly what she said, but it seems pretty close. There was a point in Prince's career, the artist known as Prince, when he was on the Purple Rain tour. He had this guitar made, which was a big deal in the next album he made, which is Around the World in a Day. But it's sort of this Roman column. I don't know. It almost feels like the guitar is from the world that I remember, and Rome is copying it. Strange. I'm going to find this video. There's a Blender artist who created this really cool animation using green screens in his little home. But he created like this full-blown space station. Well, actually, it's actually on Earth, but it's this futuristic apartment where it goes out to the balcony. As this woman is an actress, goes out to a balcony, and ships are flying by and all this other crazy stuff. Brilliantly done. But there is I think it's a Century bot or something like that pops up in the scene, and the way that it was modeled is 100%. It's dark, because I always remember these things being really bright, like the Prince guitar, because he did like different colors of it. The white one is the one that really rings this tone back to this world. And the point of the whole thing is this. When we're trying to figure out why a bunch of us remember things completely different in various regions of the world, my current take was that it was consensus reality, right? America remembers Berenstain Bears. In Europe, they remember Berenstain Bears. But because we have 300 million people here, we get to force that into reality with our minds. And so does Europe. We would have, 600 million at the time. So my thought was that, geez, it feels like life is, like the whole universe is very organic. It grows, it changes drastically in some cases, and in minor ways in other cases. Now, one of the critiques of the sort of skeptic society of Mandela effect is that people simply got it wrong, and we're all just getting corrected. And the one, I think, error in that philosophy is that, or in that theory, is that we should still have tons of Berenstain Bear people here in the United States. In fact, if Berenstain Bear, for instance, which I have no familiarity with those books at all, if some people get it wrong, well, we're still going to have probably over 51% that have it right. And it seems like almost categorically in America, no one remembers Berenstain, because that's not a name that we use over here. Berenstain at least sounds like names that we have, you know? And there's just too many to reference. I mean, you know, the other big one is the line in Empire Strikes Back. You have James Earl Jones and Mark Hamill recreating the line as we all remember it for 30 years. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, guys, you both have it wrong. You read the line and acted it voice-wise, and you heard it. And we're, you know, Mark Hamill's tormented by that line. You know, well, what'd you think about it? You know, remember that time when he said, you know, Luke, I'm your father? So there's just, I think there's overwhelming evidence that something bigger is at play. And why not acknowledge it to see if there's something there? But now I'm going into my own chamber where, you know, if I try to explain last night's dream, it's very difficult to remember all of the elements, because as you dig into a dream, at least for me, you dig in and there'll be certain highlights that you remember. And what's so strange to me is there will be some dreams that is no different than me going to bed any other night. But when I wake up, that dream in particular will be so remembered. Like I can remember it for the rest of my life. Like I have a dream where I was going down into this canyon, but which was cut mountains by some alien race. And it was like as if a bunch of us humans were taken off of Earth and we were being taken to a planet where the aliens that live there are gone. And we were going down into this just deep, deep cavern. I could probably 3D model it and show it to you guys. For whatever reason, that memory and walking with people and looking down, it's almost like you're going into an amusement park ride where you're going to say, any of you have been to Indiana Jones ride in Disneyland or one of the Disney parks, there's a point where you're spiraling down to the cars and you look down on the rest of the line. It was sort of like that. But why is it that yesterday's dream, of which I have little tiny tidbits of, if I try to begin to describe it to you, I will then have, it's almost like a cloudy apparition that, okay, I can see part of the cloud right here. Oh, that's a little bit blue. And then as I look at the blue, all of a sudden, boop, another part of the cloud of the imagery of what happened, the action and why I was there. Oh yeah, and then this, oh yeah, and then this. And, you know, it's just so bizarrely hodgy-podgy. You know, it's not like a linear reality that, you know, I went and got Chick-fil-A today and I can tell you exactly about the drive there, how I ordered it, how long it took to get it. I ate it in the parking lot, watched people drive by. That's easy in this reality. But could it be that, and this is going to sound nuts, I want you to think about this for a second. And again, I've got friends that say they remember stuff. I remember I remember one moment in a crib outside my great-grandmother's house, where I couldn't speak. My mother was talking to me about men being on the moon, and I had no means of talking back to her. So I do remember that. But isn't it interesting that our birth is something that we can't remember? It's as if we joined reality at wherever your first memory occurs. And this is sort of a tongue-in-cheek magic trick to say, because we don't remember our youth, which honestly, if you think about it, it's a very bizarre thing. You know, like I've always told you guys on the show, about the age of 7, there was just a click. And the day that I really remember remembering reality for the rest of my life, like every general quarter of every year, I was 7 years old. And I think it was the day that my parents said, we're going to go see this movie, Star Wars. I just remember they said, wash your hands, you know, get your thing together. I had no idea what that was. It was just a sunny, beautiful day. And the movie was amazing. And then it was just like one of the best days of my entire lifetime. I'd had a good day, and then I got to see Star Wars with a disco ball. I'd never seen a disco ball in my life. It's amazing. But, you know, we have so many areas of science where people are indoctrinating you. They're telling you what reality is. I just read another article today about how black hole is only 1,000 light years away, and you can see it with the naked eye, and it's like, oh my God, seriously. And I'm going to have to listen to that stupid article coming out of like associates of mine or whatever for the next quarter. You know, man, you got a black hole, 1,000, you know, it's like, shush. Tell me what gravity is accurately, and then I'll listen to you. Nope, too late. What's interesting about these other places that I see, and again, we're talking about 1 to 5 seconds, and 5 seconds would be a super rare long observation of this whole thing. And I do not dream them. That's another interesting thing. They all feel like, I mean, there's something that has to trigger in my environment to get me to think about it. When I watch the Blender thing, which I'm going to show you at least a frame of it, it triggered me. And I was like, oh, that's the reality. That's the old place I used to live. There's another place that I remember living where it was, it's sort of a post-nuclear era, like late 50s, early 60s, beatnik. You know, you have mahogany wood walls with, you know, beautiful trim steel, and everything's, it has the fabric. If there's a curtain, the fabric is that sparkly fabric from back in the day, really thick curtain, you know. But there's also a sense of sort of a realistic, not necessarily flying cars or anything, but it's definitely a step towards a George Jetson kind of world, which I think what's interesting about it is, you know, when I first saw Tron, the movie, at, I guess I was technically 12 years old, I couldn't describe why at the age of 12, seeing Sid Mead's artwork, because Mobius's artwork is in there as well, and I love his stuff, but it feels present and it feels fictionally present, meaning someone in my world thought up a really cool thing and it's just a joy to watch, like heavy metal and all that kind of stuff, right, in the movie. But Sid's stuff was like interdimensional or gosh, like inner reality. Like instead of changing a dimension necessarily, you could call it a dimension. It was like these, it's almost like if you're in Google Earth and you can view it as a satellite, or you can view it as a street, or you can overlay the streets on top of the satellite, and you get these different layers. For those of you who remember the old King Tut books that went around in the 70s, there were these beautiful books with this vellum, and you could unmask the Tut of King Tut, or the Tomb of King Tut, and you pull the top of the lid off, and it was all this clear vellum and just a print. It was absolutely brilliant. You could get down to his body. And it's almost as if certain layers of reality it totally and completely replaces the people. And there's been this theory, and I have friends of mine this comes up every once in a while. And the theory is that this might be a prison planet. And it's kind of an acidic idea to think that wherever we were before, we committed a sin against probably each other, because, you know, who cares outside of the context of us and what is good and what is bad. And then somehow we're banished to this world where we tend to lose our privileges. But instead of, in this particular metaphor or this notion, this theory, it is not that you die and get pushed into this, you have to get resurrected into a new body and you're in this prison planet called Earth. It is that you, in a live streaming situation, stream into another reality that is full of more challenges and more strife and less privilege, less success by any man's definition. Mankind, ladies. But here's where there's a contradiction as of the last 3 or 4 days after talking to my friend online. When I pop into these other, I don't know what the hell you call them, other realities, these other worlds that are very Earth-like, you know, I get a sense of everyone having figured it out. Everyone is on the same page. Everyone's cut from the same tree, and that tree is the beautiful tree of life, where no leaf spites another leaf, right? No branch spites another branch. We're all in this together. We're all in this to win it. We're trying to make the tree of life grow all at the same time and grow beautifully, spread its wings, if you will, right? So the immediate notion that happens when I go into this euphoric world is that there is no context for committing any sin towards another person. Perhaps it's because I haven't been there long enough, because I can only stay for a few seconds as I see these overlays. And just to re-describe some of this for you, sometimes it's when I'm driving, like I said, and I get this overlay and the cars are there and it feels this amazing feeling. And it's like I start to kind of see the other reality overlay on the one I'm on. The other one that was more vivid, I was in LA. I think it was like on Fairfax Street or something. And I came up to this intersection. It was like it was banging into Santa Monica Boulevard or something. And there was like a 50s diner in front of me, like Pans or whatever. And what was overlaying on top of it was sort of a futuristic interpretation of the same thing, as if, which it makes the, architectural sense or civil engineering sense, because, if we continue growing a population, a single story building would get replaced by probably a skyscraper of some sort, some tall residential thing. But for whatever reason, it didn't. And it was like, no, the population stayed relatively similar to what you have. And take a look at that place. And it would be this sort of kind of worn in, patinaed, futuristic diner. It almost looked like a car, like a train car. It wasn't, but I mean, it was just very, very interesting. So to review real quick, Mandela effect is a bunch of us getting something different. Again, the day that I heard that Eli Whitney was a white guy, I made a ton of phone calls. Every person on the phone said, well, I know he's a black guy. And so I was like, yeah, he's not anymore. And people were like, what? I had, guy who was 70 years old, 71 years old. Another guy who was 57 years old. All family friends I called, they were like, I don't remember much about him, but I know he's a black guy. And I'm like, yeah, that's me too. So for me, there's something to Mandela that is way bigger than just the lowbrow explanation that we're all getting it wrong. I'm not saying that everyone in the United States is on the same page, but it's pretty similar to being all on the same page. It's a huge group of us that have it differently. There have been movies where characters have changed realities, right? Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve. He fell in love with a woman in a painting and he wanted to go back in time to be with her. And so he studied time travel and he basically just willed it. And I remember as a kid thinking, well, that's kind of crappy. You need a time machine. You need the H.G. Wells time machine with David Warner and Malcolm McDowell, going at it. And then the more that I experience this sort of observed reality where I'm not scared to just accept what I'm seeing because it contradicts the paradigms that I've been taught that are reality, it's an interesting thing. Now, I had an episode a while back talking about, The Secret and the fact that we know that the law of attraction works. It just does. But if it doesn't work for you, that just means that your faith in what you're attracting is very low at that point in your time in your life, right? But that it can be used for bad. So imagine being back, and this is completely fictional on what I'm about to say, but it will give you an example of what simply could be. You're back in Plato's time, and all of these, Socrates and all these, geniuses. I'm sure there's some females in there that just don't get their names written down over the time, but let's just say they were in an era where they could see the difference. They could think it and they could see it because there's very few souls on Earth at the time. And so you don't need to do much but you could have a party, you could have a play that gets real popular in Rome, and you could have the play circulate around Europe. And all of a sudden reality changes because you literally programmed division into people's minds. And so when you have Plato talking about the time before the moon, maybe they romantically thought that thing up. For them, it's something completely different. The eye of God, whatever. I would always imagine the sun to be the eye of God. But you have the Egyptians who are very quarantined in their world. Because at the time, we didn't, the idea of mankind distributing across the surface of the world is something that man had to conceive of. And we don't think about that anymore. When you were born in a village and your elders, through serendipity, figured out, okay, we get our water from over there, we got our food from over here, and this is just the way it is. There's the bison there, there's the boars right there, there's the vegetables, the fruits, whatever. And why would you leave? You got everything that you need. In fact, you could stray beyond the confines of your village and find yourself in a desert. And then in your primitive mind, you're facing starvation, dehydration. And if you can escape back to your village, you bring back a story of like, man, don't ever go outside this village. It's just hostile. We got it going on here. But the second that someone is venturing out and they find a plush new oasis, better water supply, it's easier to get to, berries, because this vegetation in a particular area is much more lush. Then man would start to venture out. And so the reason why I bring that up is that it does seem as if the Egyptians themselves, at some point in very early history, had figured out how to make a boat and make a beautiful boat. Some of them are pretty massive, as a matter of fact, and that allows them to get on the Nile. Because once you stare at the Nile and say there's a big monsoon that comes by and, a tree falls into it, and you see something float on the surface, and you start putting one and two together, and you're like, oh my God, we can carve that piece of wood and we can get inside of it. Maybe someone just wrote a log as a joke, but they then traveled 2 or 3 miles down the Nile and realized, oh my gosh, we can do this, It seems like we look at the Egyptians and their pyramids and their temples and their sculptures and all that stuff, and we don't really think about consciously or admit it to each other, but they lived in a world that looked and smelled and tasted completely different than our world. There's nowhere on earth right now that's like Egypt, besides perhaps Vegas, the MGM pyramid place, right? But now we have 7.5 billion people. We now have the internet. And if mass consciousness is how this particular instance of this predominant reality that we're in is controlled, then, I'm not going to get terribly into the dark stuff, but, there are factions that want us to depopulate. Okay, so they want us to depopulate. Well, that seems like the overwhelming conscious control that we have over reality then goes back to perhaps some more easily controlled reality. Now, one would think that if that was the case, they'd want us down to 1 million people, because that's quite a few people. Much easily controlled. Perhaps they've got some mathematical simulation to say, okay, well, we're still going to keep all of our control apparatus. In fact, it's going to get even better. And so of the however many million we're allowed to have after their little doomsday virus goes around, they're going to so imprint on us the reality that they want to live in that that's all we have. Maybe they give us one and they give themselves another. I know this sounds like a little crazy, but I don't know. If you've had this thing that I'm talking about, and I'm not sure what to call it, maybe the episode will be called that, I don't know. Nothing will seem that strange. I've talked about this several times in the past when talking about darker conspiracies. It is amazing how some people simply can't digest what we see. And, it's hard to imagine how you can show people physics that contradicts the imagery that they see. We've got various politicians that have been doing extremely horrible things to women and little girls. And we've got some proof on camera, but you show it to some people and they're just, again, they're Westworld hosts. Doesn't look like anything to me. They just can't see it. But imagine that you're in a reality where your brain actually sees more of what could be, because anything can be. Their brains are less developed, or their spirit is less developed, or because they've been toxified, their soul attaching to their body is taking in less information. And so they can't see it, and they live in a completely different reality. Any of you have ever seen Pink Floyd, The Wall? There's a great animation. There's so many great animations in that movie. It is just a work of art that is hardly celebrated. It is like the rock and roll Fantasia. But there's a scene where there is it's a man's butt, let's just put it that way, who is the face of a judge in England, where they wear the fake hair. And he's walking backwards, but that's the way he walks forward. And let's just say his chin is made of a different part of the body. And he is being real cranky and yelling, and he's sort of being the teacher that the lead singer of the band had as a kid. And some people might see the President of the United States as that guy. And their reality, they really see it just super, super evil, way beyond what some of us see in the complete opposite realm. And again, there's this unifying factor between people who see him for mostly positive and some people who see them as purely negative. And I'm not trying to make this a political conversation at all, but I'm trying to give you an example of someone we all know that I can talk about. And we know that there's a polarity there, But the people that see him overwhelmingly positive are the folks that have a lot more experience in life in terms of fighting to build something positive in this world. The more experience you have with business, the more experience you have with people and managing people and bringing things together and managing finances for a group, not just for your selfish self, right? They see him, they understand him better. For the actors and celebrities that have had every line written for them, and perhaps because their face is a particular way, and they're definitely talented actors, their sense of reality is completely skewed. They have lived and built a persona, meaning their fake character, based on literally fake fictional characters that have been created for them. It's one thing to be, say, Mick Jagger. And he obviously has a persona on stage. He does not walk around the streets dancing like a chicken. It's another thing to be a Robert De Niro, where people know him for someone that is probably completely and utterly different than every single fiber of his body. And if, one actor plays 2 or 3 different roles, they know that within a year they could be Tom Cruise in Top Gun, or he could be Tom Cruise in like Edge of Tomorrow, where he played a sort of a meek journalist at the very beginning, What I'm finding with this situation, where I'm seeing these kind of echoes of a past, or it's funny. It's not even a sense of the past. That's what's weird. It's as if that world is going right now and I'm just not in it. Some worlds I find myself just as I am today. I'm driving a car by myself or something, going down the highway, and it feels like whenever I was in that reality, this particular event occurred. Some of the realities, I instantaneously am with others, and I'm never by myself in those other realities. I'm always with other folks. Sometimes I feel like a kid in some of the realities, and sometimes I feel like a young adult. And so there's this notion, okay, think about it this way, or just consider for a second. abstracting reality way away from all of these rules that we have. What is the rule? Well, I mean, this is going to be like a question you have no chance of answering because I'm going to run off in a different direction here, so I don't mean to tease you. But we believe in this world that we are born, that we're a baby, and that we go through various stages as we grow up. We have dependencies and relationships on adults, and then we are to get on our own. Then we become the adult, and then typically someone has a dependency on us. And then eventually our body expires, and most people have a philosophy of going to heaven, or there's nothing, or we don't know, we get reincarnated or whatever. And so we have certain paradigms that deal with the end. But now, what if I told you none of that's actually real? All of that is an illusion created by the vessel and the particular reality you're in at a particular time. Have you ever considered for a moment that you're not going to finish the story that you're currently in? Imagine if this is going to sound funny to those of you who are older, but imagine at some point, and it's not directly related to your age, but at some point you cross all the T's, dot all the I's, check all the boxes, and then you get a transformation of reality. You get to go to one of these realities. Perhaps you go back to the reality that you were at that's one of these things that maybe you've seen. And then at that moment of transition, you're like, oh, I didn't die. I never died as that person I was. In fact, you could be 23 years old. You could be 12. You could be 78. And you just walk straight into this other reality. And the whole time you were fearing death, perhaps. I got friends of mine that so fear death. But you don't die. You just go to this other reality. And if you have had the visions that I've had, well, but really strange is that every time one of these realities happens, and one of them is, it almost feels like the 70s a little bit, but it's almost like a sci-fi 70s. It's really strange. Not massive buildings or anything. In fact, it's kind of a small Hawaiian community or whatever. But when I went to Hawaii, boy, I was going through this heavy, just seeing old architecture and thought process. And it's almost as if someone has stolen buildings out of these realities and put them in this one just to remind us, just to go, hey, there's a really great place that you'll go to eventually. You've been there before. But perhaps just buying into linear time is the most restricting paradigm that we can adapt. And maybe there's a use for it, How many times you try to do something and there's a bunch of interruptions and you're like, gosh, guys, it just needs to be quiet, or I need to get to a nice soothing place. Maybe some people like loud noises. I used to write screenplays at a local bar when I used to drink more often. And I just get a beer and some dinner. And I'd sit there with my script. Well, I used to print my scripts and go through them. But think about I'll just give you an example of a paradigm where this could be very easily, this reality that we're in could be very easily enforced. Now, let's go back to pre-Babylonian time. And let's just use the probably super wrong history of the world, which says around 5000 AD, you are seeing the formation of the Babylonians. Because remember, they made printed coins with Queen Semiramis, so it's just like the Statue of Liberty in 4500 BC. So that demands a lot of intelligence to get to the point where you could forge that coin and have a currency, right? I mean, that's a lot of work. It's more than just 500 years. Let's just say that 5,000 years ago, we're just a budding species on this planet. And you don't have bills and you don't have taxes. All you do is get up and you take care of life like Africans do today. Sorry, I got a package from Liechtenstein just now. Thank you, Sylvia. I'll get into it a little later. But yeah, without bills, without taxes, then you don't have this necessarily adaptation to linear time like we do today. Okay, get to work, make money, and now give it to these people who don't have linear time, right? Do the ruling class of the world worry about linear time? Hell no. They don't work for a living. Even if you want to say that they're controlling the world and all this other stuff, yeah, what is that, a couple meetings a day or maybe a week? What I find fascinating is that, again, all of these places that I've seen, which, here's the thing, someone could be cynical and say, yeah, you're inventing these because of some, I don't know, inability to accept reality. So you're creating these alternate realities and blah, blah, blah. It's like, one, I wouldn't necessarily have ever believed that this could even be possible. So it doesn't make any sense that you sit around imagining things that you don't think are impossible, or don't think are possible. And so it's just one of those things where, you'll dream things that are absolutely inventive. And you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh my God, I dreamed about this. Like when I was a little kid, I said this dream once before, but I was playing an arcade game. It's about 85, 86. It's a dream. I played a coin op game, stand-up arcade, right? And my parents walked in and said, we got to go, hurry up. And I'm playing this game and I'm doing really, really well. And so in the dream, in the split second, I said, okay, let me just save my game. And I had a RAM stick, right? These things didn't exist back in the day. And I remember it was just sitting on where you would normally put your quarters to tell someone you're going to play next. I took this thing off. I put it in the box. I hit a button. I grabbed the card out. And I took off with my parents. And that's pretty much the end of the dream. But I remember waking up fairly soon after that moment in time in the dream. And I thought, wow, yeah, why can't we store everything on RAM cards? And, 15 years later, that was the concept. The iPods and these little readers, of course, iPods have drives in them, so they could do 1,000 songs. But you just buy a 4 gig stick at the grocery store for $2. What if a place like Egypt, for instance, ancient Egypt, is almost the carcass of one of these realities, of these structures are there to trigger our minds, and this is why we have such a weird feeling. Some of you may recall that I forgot what it's called, but there's a disease, I think, or some mental condition where some people will look at ancient marble statues like the Statue of David, and they have really bizarre feelings. And it is typically relayed as a negative feeling, but negative could be very specific to, I no longer feel comfortable in this reality because I'm seeing the old one. And I remember that has happened to me. I mean, when I was younger, I no longer have this issue, but I remember being a young kid, which again would be, technically speaking, even with a relativity approach to it, I'm a young version of what I am today. Like whenever I transition to this particular reality, I'm sort of an infant. I no longer remember where I was before, and now I'm seeing these echoes. And when I would look at, definitely like looking at Catholic religion stuff, like going into a church and seeing it, there was nothing warm fuzzy about looking at, Christ on a cross, which is something that the Catholic Church does in America, whereas other denominations just have a beam, that creates the cross. But some of that old architecture, when you look in books and stuff and you see things, it just, I don't know, it was almost like it had the shining in it. You were seeing, like when you grab, they say psychics grab objects and they can see, where the object's been, who owned it, whatever it was used for. But it was almost like a visual version of that. So what if the universe is really super abstract? And it is, I'll give you another example that we run into all the time, and we've heard this story 100 times. If you're over 30, for sure, you've heard this story. How many times have you heard people that were in really bad accidents and they're in a life and death situation, and the paramedics know to keep the patient conscious. They start talking to them loudly, get them to answer any questions. What's your name, man? Where are you going? Hey, do you like baseball? Whatever you can do to keep them conscious. You keep them into this reality and they don't die. But the second that the patient loses consciousness, you lose them. How many times have we seen old couples that have been together for 70 years? They're in their 90s or even older. And when one of the spouses passes away, the other one drifts off. One of them has a terminal illness and the other one just elects to leave. But the timing is amazing. You see these articles where they'll be in bed holding hands and nobody took a poison kit or anything like that. They just choose to go and they have 100% power to let go. Because if you truly find someone that you can at least call your soulmate, I don't know if those things exist. I don't think if they do exist, it's more likely that there's multiple people that qualify in your life to be that special to you because of the connection that you have. And again, to say you have your soulmate at 15 is different than 25, 35, 45, 55, because as you grow up every decade, what you desire from this planet, especially from another human being, changes drastically. And unless your partner grows up exactly with you and desires the same things that you want, you typically grow apart to a degree, and then there's a bunch of management of the relationship as things ebb and flow. So never lose faith in finding someone super special. But if you do find someone that you can last 50 to 70 years with, I think if both of you hit near 100 and you get married at 15, you could be together 80 years. I mean, it's just wild, right? But when they leave, your soul is attached to theirs because of what the Hindus talk about. The more you make love, you exchange a part of your soul with the other person. Well, let's just say they were able to stay active for however long they're able to stay active, decades and decades and decades. And when that soul goes, it's a siphon on your soul and you just both take off. I think the reason why this fascinates me, and one of the reasons why I love bringing this to you, is that we know that there's nothing to fear but fear itself, which is a statement that has so many meanings at so many different contexts, in so many different contexts, I should say, that we know that we shouldn't be living at any point in time in fear, no matter what. Let's just say, I've been watching videos. There's a new series on YouTube. I don't know if it's new. Who the hell knows? I forgot to look at the month dates on it, but they're still making new episodes. Where this guy is going around. He spent some time in prison. This big black guy. Super sweet dude. But he's going around and he's trying to get kids. He's doing basically the scared straight before you ever get into prison, before you ever glorify a life that would put you in prison, by interviewing ex-inmates to say, tell us your stories, tell us the stuff you can't unsee, the things that changed you. In some cases, some people go with no discipline and they end up coming and go, man, I learned a lot about myself. One guy said, I had no personal hygiene until I went to prison. But that's pretty rare. But if you committed a crime and you do go to jail, that's your penalty. It's just not being in society, not getting any more good food. But it's not like you can't have some sort of happiness in there. Like we get a little crazy of we've created hell on earth in some of these prisons where it's like, you're going to go in and gain more time. You're going to get beat up. You're going to get prosecuted way beyond your crime. Now, some people maybe deserve that kind of stuff, like an Epstein, but some people have just got hooked on drugs and they go in and then all of a sudden their whole life's upside down. They get murdered in prison, which is not proportionate punishment to their crime. So fear is everywhere. Fear is on top of fear, on top of fear. But in this reality, I'm telling you, it all washes away. Seriously, it's like when your car's been splattered by mud and you're able to get to a water supply before it dries. And it's this amazing moment where you just run a hose down your hood and it all just falls off on your driveway and you push it off your driveway into the drain and everything's clean again. It was just that easy. It always baffles me to think for a split second. Baffles probably the wrong word, but it's fascinating. It's interesting to think about sort of what we're not allowed to think about in modern reality, which is to live forever. We don't really have a plan to live forever, do we? And the nice thing is that as we renew, it's almost like Doctor Who. There's brand new objectives, brand new things to do. In his particular case, he's always mitigating threat and mitigating evil. But maybe in the rest of the universe, it's just totally chill and relaxed. And maybe, when I heard Shirley MacLaine coming up with her New Age religion in the late 80s, which she had actually gotten off some other guy, I can't remember what guru or whatever she followed, her belief system was that we definitely live a linear, compartmentalized life. There is no reality but the one that we're in for the time being. But when you die, you choose exactly what family you're going to go into, what timetable you're going to go to, what difficulty you're on. And so just accept anything in your life because you chose it. Initially, when you think about that from the perspective of being a straight up linear human, that philosophy just probably rubs you wrong. You're like, yeah, come on. I got friends of mine that had parents that beat them up and foster parents that raped them and stuff. How on earth could that ever be something that anyone would want to pick for themselves? And lately I've had a couple takes on that may change the way that even I view that situation, which is one, imagine playing a video game. For those of you who've played any video game in your life, you could play certain video games and there's a game setting for the difficulty of the game. And one of them's super easy. One of them's like, some of the top game difficulties have been named by their creators as impossible. Like this is so difficult, no help, no ammo. It's like Rust, it's just like you start off in this real basic world. But sometimes we select a harder level and then the name of the game is you don't know what's going to take place. You have an idea of generally what could take place, like the possibilities, the spectrums. But let's just say you were human. You go to the other side, you're sitting in the green room, chilling with God, doing whatever you want to do. And you go, okay, well, now I see my whole life. I mean, I see the last several thousand lives I've lived. I don't even care about the ones before that because it's not important to remember what you were before. It's not important. You live forever. What does it matter? It's all about the now. So you set the bar a little hotter. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be born into a cancerous body. You're going to be born with an abusive family, whatever. You don't know. It could be that you live a fairly normal life until maybe you're 20 years old, and then the apocalypse happens. That's your difficulty rating. And so I think that, the Shirley MacLaine thing is potentially a little less, I should say, on point and more metaphorical difficulties. The other thing that I've noticed when I have these little visions is that it feels a bit like that movie, was it Somewhere in Time, where Christopher Reeve was able to meditate and get back to this era to meet this girl. And then there's something that happens to him in the end of the movie, which unfortunately reminds him of the current time frame, and he ends up losing access to that. That's the false ending, by the way. He goes back to modern day time, which would be the early 80s. So take that and put it in reverse. You're now driving down the street and you're having this epiphany, like I do every once in a while. I haven't had it in a while. Orange County, there's some highways down here that really nail me. There was one in Ventura, and the one that really triggers me is up there in Ventura, California. There was a highway that we always drove on. I can't remember where the hell we were going or why, but when I worked at Jim Hall Racing, it was a little highway, like a 2-lane one direction, 2-lane the other direction, which for California is tiny. And it had walls on both sides of the highway, which is very traditional for California cities because it keeps the sound from the highway hitting all the homes. But it had vegetation, very old vegetation, all the way down on top of the walls, kind of growing on the walls. The overpasses were all grown over with this vegetation. Very beautiful. Like Again, not apocalyptically done. But when I get in that sort of environment, I have these flashes. It's crazy. But now what if in one particular time, it just goes boom, 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 and I'm in it? Now, at face value, you might think, oh, that would be traumatizing. You'd be like, who am I? Where am I? Where am I going? But here's what's weird. When that vision occurs, for an infinitesimal amount of time, my life in that world comes back to me as if this is who I've always been. So there's no adaptation moment, no shock and awe to your system. You just fall into that reality. I'd be interested if any of you have had this happen besides my friend online. Because it's sort of like a time bandit door, You found something in the universe that is giving you indications that maybe it's not the way you think it is. And, it's really kind of interesting. I don't want to ruin anything for you, but I'll double blind this statement. There is a science fiction story out there that one can watch on your TV. And there were a bunch of synthetic robot kind of people who actually were able to escape in this oasis, kind of like Moriarty in Star Trek, who, I don't know if you've ever seen the episodes, but he became a sentient hologram in one episode, and then 4 years later they brought him back before they ended Next Generation. I think it was 4 years. And he was able to escape the hologram. But what happened was they tricked him into being a hologram inside of a hologram, and they ended up putting him inside this kind of holographic memory computer that you could hold in your hand. And inside that little holographic chamber with his girlfriend was the whole universe, a duplicate of it, like Zonnie Woob's universe in his office from Hitchhiker's Guide. And it's just interesting that we see those metaphors in science fiction all the time. But what if the storyline actually originated from reality? Something that we all, think about writers. They're sitting around writing all the time. Like when you write, you observe reality in a completely different way. Because when someone says something funny, if someone goes through a tough time in life, if there's any heroic actions in your life, that maybe, the heroic actions at like a 3, but that if you wrote it into a fictional circumstance, change some things, you can make it an 8 to a 10, and then you got a movie. You got some superhero that you can work with, not necessarily with mutant powers, but just a really cool Clint Eastwood character back in his youth, What I find fascinating in discussing it with you now is that it is visually triggered. And it could just be a shape. Like again, when I was watching Tron, the first, and this is like the Sid thing. And what's interesting is people who followed Sid Mead, the futurist designer, we get together at his house and you have these conversations and everyone's trying to tell each other why his art is so intoxicating. Like it takes over your entire spirit. And I remember there's some people in his life that were more functional in his life. And I remember sitting down and finally being able to put it into words and talking about his use of geometry, his use of primitive shapes and using them in ways that we simply haven't seen them put together as a functional object, because everything that typically designers design for futuristic movies is always based on previous paradigms of thinking. And what Sid did was somehow in his youth, he threw it all out the door and said, maybe I'll use something that exists today, but I'm going to always try to use something that's never existed. And then maybe the future will emulate his projections. And then boom, you get the Cybertruck from Elon Musk, which was a direct copy of his car from Blade Runner that Deckard drove around the city. Apparently they have that picture of that on the wall at his car design facilities. I met one of the guys that works for him at Sid's funeral. But anyway, I totally brought this up. I articulated it great, but this person is not a designer. And I just saw deer eyes. It was like, oh, well, I don't really understand anything that you're saying. It was sort of what he told me. And I was like, oh, that's so sad. It's like, because some people have been with him for a very long time and they just have never, they got him on a different level. They got him on a level that I never got him, and they appreciated him infinitely for what they got out of him. But it's always a beautiful thing when you can share a communion with someone about one of these sort of subjects, it just has to do with so much paradigm enforcement. This is the way it is, and you just need to accept it. Come on, you're defying progress if you don't endorse the way the world is. That's a big lie. Our response should be something like, you're never going to see your future if you don't endorse my abstract methodology of inventing the future. Meaning, we're to go in directions we've never gone before, not to continue just being in the village, right? That analogy I brought up earlier. We are to eventually figure out that traveling the surface of the planet is something that's allowed. If you believe in God, well, then he worked really hard like Slotty Botfast, and he made glaciers and cliffs and fjords, and we're supposed to see them. We're supposed to see these places. We're supposed to see mountains in Colorado in America. We're supposed to see the Mojave Desert, the lush forests of Washington State, the amazingly flat wheat plains in east or western Kansas. We're supposed to see these things. And if we never get enough guts to do something different, we're never going to encounter these things. But let me throw at you another reason why perhaps we don't live in those other realities at this current time. What if we've spent damn near an eternity in those other realms, and now we're kind of like, well, we need to venture out. At this perspective, I feel like this is the lame brain, fear-mongering village that we live in called planet Earth in 2020. But those other places don't have any of that. There's no fear at all in those other places. In fact, it's like it's been distilled out of our existence, and it's all about waking up every day in a super positive world. There's no threat to your existence at all. There's not threats from meteorites. There's not threats from humans. Not threats from animals. And now let's just see what you can create. What I have found in pop culture in America is very interesting and very consistent. Let's take the 80s against the 90s. In the 80s, you had a lot of people that were stuck in bad situations, and they expressed themselves through hip hop. And they were like, cocaine's destroying my neighborhood, don't do it. Being lazy and buying into welfare programs is destroying us, don't do it. Pick yourself up. Don't make excuses. Yes, life can be hard. That's just the way life is on this planet. Pick yourself up, get better, get better. When you look at the 90s, we had followed a lot of the advice from the 80s, had a positive life, and then because it was the opposite, right? We started the decade out in the opposite realm and sought the realm of positivity. So we started out in a lot of negativity. Those that talked about this, right? Go look at those hip hop making of out of New York, especially, because that's where it really blew up in that time frame. Look at all the positivity, Electric Boogaloo out of LA, positivity, don't gang fight, dance it off, which for people today might sound really fruity, but it was awesome. You look at the 90s, you have all the kids that had everything, right? Parents gave them everything. What did they do? They ran off and wanted to make everything negative. Dress like hobos. Let's have every single song that's just like, if you thought a country song whined and moaned about it, the guy losing his truck and his beard and his whatever, his wife or whatever. The kids of the 90s took it all the way down to mentally ill people and stuff. And it was just like kids that didn't have any problems in their lives, just throwing out negativity. So where would our world be designed? The one that we're in now, the one that you can hear my voice in right now. Maybe It's when we're in those other realms of positivity, we have the capacity to design something that is more challenging, which is what we're in today. You know the old analogy about a coin having two sides. Do we want to live in a world with no real massive choice? I think we could take a break every once in a while and go into a real positive realm, but it's almost as if things, if they don't flip-flop, you never get the other side of the coin. Now, if you're paying attention, there is seemingly sort of a perpetual negativity in the 21st century, right? As these individuals that run the planet really want to gain control through repression, through taking away all of our money, taking away our livelihoods and that kind of thing. So, it would just be fascinating if, and people have prayed to do this, and people are into meditation and more crystal-based lifestyles. They've had efforts where they try to meditate on the world and make it a better place and meditate on the world. And I actually think if we could get a mass majority, which is a lot of what Stephen Greer's latest movie, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, is trying to assert, that if we can just consciously think this place up, it'd be fascinating if not only did the world get more positive, but that one of those overlay places that I've seen just flutters into reality. It's like someone cross-dissolving two video feeds from, say, this is LA in let's do like 1850, where it's just all dirt roads, barely anyone lives here. And then we overlay 1955 or 1935 LA, where Hollywood's booming and, everyone's got a future. The American dream's alive. Freedom is just all around you constantly. You could be anything you want to be, sort of thing. I think one of the silver linings for 2020 so far, this is March 6th, is that we've sort of disengaged from the control media. We're paying attention to each other more. We're spending more time with each other during this phase. And this is a good time to kind of bring up these subjects because you have some peace and quiet in your life. You're forced to have it. Can't go to work. A lot of people can't go to work. It's now about to change here at the end of this week, which is great. And we're organizing our thoughts. We're organizing our spirits. We are becoming more sentient. And just think about, as they turn the world back on, what if we kept the regiments that we learned during this cycle? We go out and more strategically, I should say, not less, but more strategically. We appreciate a walk on the beach, unlike before. Like I've always tell you guys, when you live in the Midwest, you might think about moving to California, and then, I'm just going to go to the beach every day, beach, waves. I'll start surfing, and then you move here, and life is very, hectic at times and demanding, and you don't perceive the beach as what it truly is, which is this beautiful oasis. They want to charge you everywhere you go. Like if you want to park on the beach, let's say you want to go every day, you're going to have to set aside, I don't know, $300 to go every day of the month, because your parking is going to run you metered parking. There's beach parking. There's structured parking. Unless you live close enough to just get on a bike and go down there for free, which is why those homes cost millions and millions of dollars down there. So you're kind of paying one way or the other. You can't enjoy the wonders of nature without coughing up some cash. And I know there's a lot of places where that is not the case, so trust me, I'm aware. But maybe now it's more like, freedom is something that really, really exists. Fear is something that is not naturally a part of a well-balanced society. And so we just wholly reject anything that goes against those peaceful mechanisms. And of course, if you have another area of the world that is in a tyrannical situation and they're trying to take over the world, which is pretty much China at this point, and we're going to have to make provisions to say, okay, well, we got to control those, the communists over there from doing a bunch of nefarious stuff, raiding our computers and really trying to buy up all of our land and erase our way of life. So we have to keep on our toes, as it would be. We don't want to let it get to a point where we're in a war. So we want to engage in things that are so enforced through design that it can't get there. They can't get there, and we don't have to go there. That sort of thing. Anyway, let me know what you think about all this. I apologize for struggling to explain some of this stuff. Hopefully I'm giving you enough that you can kind of see what's going on. And I have to say, I'm utterly fascinated if any of you have experienced this. Finding another soul in the world that told me she was experiencing this, and I don't think she's seen all the episodes, I don't know, was very powerful for me. I was like, oh my God, really? You see that too? And again, her experience is most likely different than mine, completely, but it's still the same concept, same open paradigm of reality being more abstract and nebulous. And the other thing too would be, there are various factions out there that lean on, well, just say it, Scientology leans heavily on reincarnation in a previous life. And so, I don't know if this was L. Ron Hubbard's initial assertion. I think it was. But this original sin that keeps all of the Christians in check, believing that you're always in error and you have to constantly worship, going through man, thus being controlled. The Scientology folks do it a different way. They say that, anything that's bad in this world is an echo from a previous bad thing you did in a previous life, excuse me. And so they've created original sin in a different way, so that you have to constantly go in and get those sessions, until you're broke. And so I disagree with that completely, because I don't think man should be ever told. I mean, imagine you didn't believe that before, and then someone tells you that and you believe it. You weren't in Christianity before, but someone tells you, by the way, do you know about original sin? You're like, oh, wow, what the hell is that? Well, you're a sinner because Eve and Adam and da-da-da, and it's on your back, and we know you're not perfect. And it's always, Mormons always say that. Well, you're not perfect because you need us. And it's like, maybe I need you as an individual because you've got a solution to a problem I've got. But needing your whole paradigm and your prison planet thing, anyone who's selling you an original sin thing where they have the solution and you don't, is selling you a prison paradigm. There's no other way you can look at it, in my opinion. So imagine that what I'm saying is true, and let's say some brilliant people figured it out. And they're like, uh-oh. And then there's 4 or 5 guys at a table, these Jekyll Island kind of meetings, and they're like, well, what's the deal? There's that, that reality is very abstract. We've talked about this. We all agree. Yeah. Okay. Well, if they ever find out that they have the option of just choosing to walk away from this, and they know that there's other realities, and they don't fear death anymore because they understand that there's just an infinite amount of realities out there, well, maybe they won't be so scared to cut our heads off. Those of us that control the world, make it a bad place. And so they take what you figure out about the world and they always cast it in a way that is back to their control apparatus. Oh yeah, you figure that, but it's not that, it's this, it's original sin, something ridiculous. So this is where we get into that policing your own paradigm. Make your own decisions, observe the universe, acknowledge what you see. Don't worry about everyone else's opinion, including mine. Just let me know what you think in the comments. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, it's all spruced up. So we have all the videos up there. I think they're all categorized properly now. We have 2 video, 2 audio, 4 social media, a couple ways to donate. We had a donation through PayPal today, which I'll throw out a shout out in the credits at the end of this one. I did get the person's handle, which was cool. But in the previous ones, I was just getting the fact that I was getting donated to, and I didn't see any name. But again, times are rough, so I understand if anyone needs to suspend their financial support. But for all those who sacrifice $1 or $2, thank you so much, or even more. We have an all-new remastered Season 1. There's a store in case you want to get some tchotchkes for Season 5. Those will be gone probably by at least the end of the month when this season's over. And then we'll dream up some new ideas. But anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.